Hello. This is the part of the evening where we talk about trains, which I'm sure you'll find fascinating. Welcome. Now, what's been really useful, actually, has been that I basically have to do no historical context whatsoever, which is really useful. It's all been done for me. One of the interesting things I noticed just from the previous talks, Stoke Newington station wasn't in Stoke Newington, which is actually for railways quite normal because they did not give a crap where they were. They just put a railway in and then name stuff whatever you like. And we'll get to that. But before we start about Stoke Newington, I thought I'd set the scene for railways in London. And the first railway opened in London in 1836, and that was the London and Greenwich Railway, which ran from Deptford towards London Bridge. It ended in Bermondsey. And that was the first bit of railway in London. It was all built on a viaduct. Of course, railways had been popping up in the north of England. The first intercity railway in the world for a modern railway was opened in 1830 between Liverpool and Manchester. And the first modern-looking railway was opened in the Stockton and Darlington almost 200 years ago in 1825. Now, because of the road layouts and the boundaries that we've already been talking about, a ribbon of development spread along what's now the A10, and the railways started following this as we hit towards railway mania. And in this part of the world, this was the fiefdom of the Eastern Counties Railway, and that opened a station called Tottenham. It looked a bit like that. It was nowhere near Tottenham. This is now Tottenham Hale, hence why it's called Tottenham Hale, because it's near Tottenham. The railway of the Eastern Counties, they use the path of the River Lee, and Stoke Newington is a little bit elevated and kind of in the upper valley area, and this diverged from the Great Eastern Main Line, which is, if you don't know, the line from Liverpool Street to Norwich. And it diverged and went north through what is now the Hackney Marshes, through Tottenham and onwards towards Broxbourne, and eventually got towards Cambridge. So it followed that ribbon, but wasn't quite near it. So in the 1840s, the railways in the area started to expand towards pre-existing urban areas and industrialised areas towards Edmonton. The Enfield Town branch soon opened in 1849, and that we now know as the Overground line that goes through Stoke Newington. However, anyone here heard of a station called Angel Road? It is now closed. If you go there, you're now trespassing. It's been replaced by Meridian Water, and that used to be the junction of the original line to Enfield Town. It used to diverge off and go to Lower Edmonton, now Edmonton Green, and then it would head off to Enfield Town. But the Great Eastern Railway, which kind of subsumed the Eastern Counties Railway in 1862, they wanted to target the urban ribbon of development, and so they started setting their sights on the areas of Walthamstow, Stoke Newington, and towards Edmonton. So, the Eastern Counties Railway, the Eastern Counties Railway had built their terminus station, and you're thinking, yes, Great Eastern, that's Liverpool Street. No, they couldn't get in the city yet, and had to open their station at a place called Bishopsgate, which, if you now know, is all those kind of old abandoned viaducts around Brick Lane which aren't used by the Overground. So that was where they built Bishopsgate. It was a good stepper into the 1960s, but that was the original Great Eastern terminus. You'll imagine the Great Eastern was trying to cater for the city upmarket gentlemen with their top hats going into the city, and they were being spat out into Bishopsgate, which was not a very nice area. So the Great Eastern Railway were very keen to buy up the land at what is now Liverpool Street Station, which of course is a terrible name for a station that doesn't go to Liverpool, bearing in mind that Euston is the station, which is where you go to Liverpool. All very confusing. Anyway, so the Great Eastern Railway started thinking about this targeting towards the Stoke Newington line, and they were thinking about this in 1864, and they wanted to start building right away. They got the Act of Parliament, and then they had no money. Why? Because they were building something in the City of London, and that was really, really hard to build. And they were struggling financially. Now, one of the interesting factors of getting permission to build their line, the Stoke Newington and Edmonton Railway as it was to become, was that they had to offer cheap workmen's fares. You'll see these gentlemen over here. So this was often employed by the railway companies who were very much interested in two things. First class passengers, because they paid lots of money. And freight. Freight is great, and I'm not saying that because I'm a freight manager in my day job, but I'm saying that because freight was extremely lucrative. It was mainly what the railways were built for, and also if it got delayed, freight doesn't complain. So you have the workmen's fairs that were introduced to attract people into the city, and this is also what helped to get the funding to build Liverpool Street Station. This view here is looking along what is now platform 10. So platform 10 is now this mainline platform here. You'll notice there's a bridge and you've got this building over here. This is all swept away. This is now listed, this area of Liverpool Street Station, which is the west side, platforms 1 to 10. And to the right-hand side, 11 to 17, that area was rebuilt in the 1980s and hilariously has just been listed, which is good. Even though it's a bit dingy down the eastern side, it's good because there's a whole development plan that was about to be done, which was going to knock down lots of Liverpool Street, and now they can't do that because it's all been listed, which is very clever. Whoever thought of that was a genius. Anyway, right, so they start constructing the railway in the late 1860s, and this railway line is going to go from Hackney Downs. It's going to wiggle its way through the edge of Stoke Newington and up towards the boundaries of Tottenham and towards Edmonton, where it joined that original branch line I mentioned from Angel Road at what they called a station called Lower Edmonton High Level. Very confusing, Lower Edmonton High Level. That's now Edmonton Green Station. There was a low-level platform just down below, and then there was the line towards Enfield Town. And this started opening in 1872. It opened in sections. It also had a connection with the Tottenham and Hampstead Railway, which you may know as the Gospel Oak to Barking line, or what railway people call the Goblin, because that's just a funny name for it. Another funny railway line was built in 1878, which is the Palace Gates branch. Now this curved off at Seven Sisters and then went towards West Green, which is now a school, and then went over Wood Green High Road, where the court is, and past the shopping city, and then ended at Palace Gates. The original plan was to go up towards Alexandra Palace, but the Great Eastern lost the race to the Great Northern Railway, which built their own railway, which was open all the way until 1954. It was going to become the Northern Line, and then it didn't. But that's another talk in another part of North London. So, the station, it opens in this area. So, this is the 1860s. This is the ribbon of development. You can see there's two strands going towards Clapton, and this is the what's now the A10. You'll recognise the reservoirs over here and these areas, and now I know why you have these weird blocks here, which is fantastic. So the railway lines, the first one you can see here, you've got the kind of lines over here, you've got the river valley of this area, and this is what the area looked like in the 1860s. So the development was very much focused around these main roads effectively. And you can see here, if we point to these areas here, these types of areas. The station was built around here and it went round the back. So the railway tried to avoid existing developments because it was much cheaper to build on land that was not developed rather than land that already was. And so this is the small urban area that the line was serving, which initially was actually populated by rather wealthy people, but the workmen's fairs soon changed that and the rich people would move further out. They could afford the fairs and the bigger houses, etc. So by the 1890s, just a few decades later, and we've got major development. The railway is now opened, it's settled, we've gone straight whacking through Stoke Newington Common. So you can see how by this time you get to the 1890s, the railway is now in what is a very, very built up area, and all these more modern houses very much focused on working class neighbourhoods. As the station opened in 1872, this is what the station looked like with this very smart looking gentleman over here. So we've got a very nice looking but very plain type of building. But what's interesting is that the railway is often built in the same vernacular across their networks. And for the stations that are left, all of the stations on the line, Rectory Road, Stamford Hill, Stoke Newington, were all built in this similar type of vernacular. So Stoke Newington was no exception. Down at platform level, we have these lovely Great Eastern style sawtooth canopies, they're called, with dagger boards. These are dagger boards. Now, they're not called dagger boards because they look like knives. Dagger boards are so named because they look like the back end of a sheep, the taily flap that gets covered in poop. Yeah, those are called daggers. And that's why they're called dagger boards, which I bet you didn't know. So this is pre-World War I can tell, because you have this Pre-war steam engine, you've got the old signalling here with these semaphore signals which would drop down for go and go up again for stop. You'll notice it's mounted on the other side. This train's coming towards us on this track, we run on the left, but the reason it's here is because the line was built on a big curve and then you go through this big bridge. So that's how they had to put the signal on that side so the drivers could actually see them. And you'll see, compared to today, you'll see later, that the facilities were rather nice. There was a bookshop there, you had toilets and waiting rooms. Can you imagine now? Platforms are rather desolate. We'll get to why later. They even installed a milk churn lift in the 1880s at the station. We have more pictures. This is now from the London or up platform. Railway vernacular, up is towards London, and if your railway's not going towards London, it's towards the nearest settlement, and down is the other way. So south or here is the up platform. You can see here the very long skew bridge which the A10 goes across here, and you can see the facilities on the northbound or down platform, which are not quite as nice, because generally speaking this is for passengers going to London and the other platform is mainly for people getting off, not so much for local traffic. So the opening of these stations on this line, the 1870s into the 1880s, stimulated a massive amount of housing development, partly because of the fact that they were attracting workmen's type fares. And then the railways effectively enabled all this extra urban development, and then they kind of caused a problem. They induced competition from things like tramways and buses, which could undercut the railways on cost, and therefore the railway in Stoke Newington struggled for passenger revenue throughout the years in kind of fluctuating over time. Now, goods traffic was massive. There was depots and stuff right up in the north in Cambridgeshire, and freight would be coming through either through Tottenham Hale or through this line, a hell of a lot in between the passenger trains, but the passenger traffic did start to suffer a little bit when the tramways started to open, and the populations of these parts of London were massively growing. And then we get to a very interesting part of this area's history. Most of you in this room, I assume, have heard of the London Underground. But did you know the London Underground was planned to serve Stoke Newington? No. So railway mania is what brought us lots of lines crisscrossing North London and indeed crisscrossing the country. Most of them got rid of by beaching. Boo. But there were lots of interesting plans across this part of North London for underground railways. This one here, the LW and EFR, that is the London, Walthamstow and Epping Forest Railway, which is the black line here, branching towards South Tottenham. So this is the Great Eastern lines that you see here, Liverpool Street to Chingford, Cambridge to Stratford, and it was going to come off here. And you can see there's a line, we've got this branch here, which is basically kind of following the Chingford branch. It's almost duplicating it really, and that was kind of the plan. So the London, Walthamstow and Epping Forest Railway, which I'm going to try and say not too many times because it's a bit of a mouthful, what they were going to do is they were going to build it with big tunnels. Now, have any of you taken the Great Northern trains down to Moorgate from Finsbury Park? You stood on the platform at Highbury and Islington, noticed that they're very big tunnels. Those are 16 feet wide, or 4.9 metres. They were built for tube trains, and now they have mainline trains. And the whole point of that was, with the Great Northern Railway, was that you'd have a train come in at Finsbury Park, knock off the steam engine, put on an electric loco, and it would take the train straight into Moorgate from the main line. This is exactly the same idea, and the Great Eastern Railway kind of supported it, and then the Great Eastern didn't support it, because they thought, actually, we want to build our own underground line. And then they were like, actually, we don't have the money for that, so maybe you can build it after all. And these ding-dongs happened from 1880 until 1910, where we had these potential lines being built, or not being built, and in various different formats. So this was for the London, Walthamstow and Epping Forest Railway. Another branch was going to end in this area here, roughly where Tottenham Hotspur Stadium is, and you can see it was going to run right through Stoke Newington and follow this line here, partly as a relief to the Great Eastern Railway. The line was designed by an engineer called James Henry Greathead. Oh, I'm here. I need you again. James Henry Greathead was one of the pioneers of London Underground tunnelling technology. So basically we got him to thank for the idea of building tube tunnels, because the way they built underground railways before that, from the 1860s, when the Metropolitan Railway opened in 1863, was to dig a big trench, and you put your railway in the trench and then you cover it over and have to leave big gaps in it because you had steam trains. But this was for electric trains, which was much different. Now, another idea came along, and this is another mouthful, which is for the Piccadilly City and North East London Railway. Not the Piccadilly line, for reasons we'll get to. So, The main line of it here would have gone through the Queen's Gate, now called Queensway. It would have gone through Hyde Park Corner. Can you see there's a problem here? What's this line today? That's the Central Line. And then it would have gone along the Circle Line, and then it would have split into these two branches, one going through Victoria Park and up into Walthamstow like this, and this one going right up the A10 to Stamford Road, Argola Street, Church Street, just near Stoke Newington Station. There would have been an underground station here. And then it would have popped up onto the avenue, which would have been really useful for me, because that would have been about a 5-minute walk from where I live now. And then it would have headed up towards Chaseside Southgate. And this was much more of a conventional tube. And you can see it on this one here. They were basically called the Morgan Tubes, JP Morgan Bank. And they were in battle with another company run by a man called Charles Tyson Yerkes. He had big plans and a very big moustache. And he built a competing line, and he eventually bought the Central London Railway, now the Central Line, and that was called the Great Northern Piccadilly and Brompton Railway, which in 1906 opened as the Piccadilly Line. So there was massive competition taking place underneath London streets to build underground railways, which would have gone right through Stoke Newington down here. Wouldn't that have been convenient? So one of the reasons they didn't get built was because funding. It was a battle for funding, and the reason why the Yerkes tubes got built, which is the Charing Cross Euston Hampstead Railway, the Piccadilly and the Bakerloo line, is because basically he was a massive liar and cheat. He just told people, I have the money to build it, even though he didn't. And before he got in trouble, he very cleverly died. Moving on. There we go. So, to give you an idea of what these tubes may have looked like, this is the original Great Northern and City Railway. So this is now the line to Moorgate, and you can see how big this tube train is. It's massive. That's because it's taking advantage of the big tunnels. Now, this became part of the National Rail, so it's now your Great Northern services. If you're wondering where this abandoned platform is, this is in Finsbury Park. This platform was abandoned in 1964 for the construction of the Victoria Line. So this is now the southbound Victoria Line platform. This here is a cute little early tube train on the what they call here the Hampstead and Highgate line, which was the Hampstead Tube, and this is running in about 3.5 metre wide tunnels compared to 4.9 metres. And this is what the tube through Stoke Newington may have looked like had it been built. Also notice the driver is in the open. That would have been an interesting experience, wouldn't it? Through the years, we have modernisation of the trains, and they go from green to this blue-grey and to this blue livery. You can see here the awnings at Bethnal Green were surviving, but modernisation meant other things as well. So, for example, these lovely canopies, they survived electrification. Often, electrification is a problem because the canopies can sometimes be too close to the wires and cause electrical interference issues, but not here, because they're nice and tucked away and they use the lower voltage. And then they experimented with 25,000 volts, which is the standard now, and worked out that even 25,000 volts was completely fine. But yet in the early 1970s, they started taking them down. And what's really interesting about this is because of the building's rateable value. BR had to pay rates to the local council based on the types of structures and buildings they had here. Look at this lady waiting in what was the old waiting room there, with the old staircase. They've taken off the roof, they're taking away the canopies, and then they put this thing there, which is still here today, and basically made what was a nice, pleasant suburban station into a bit of a kind of open cave. So the reason they did that was to lower the rateable value, and the other reason was because BR was having to go through a lot of rationalisation, having to save lots of money. And another thing they did is they pulled down the station building. Yes. So BR, in the 1960s, when they were electrifying the lines up to Manchester, they had a new type of design, a modular building, and this means you could basically take like an IKEA approach to buildings. You could just basically get the bits and put it up and then squeeze it into your particulars of where you are constrained by your location. This evolved into a thing called CLASP, which was a horrible thing, which mainly happened in South London, so it sucks to be them. And basically it was a modern kind of flat pack building, and this had evolved in the 1970s to the D70 style, which is basically a pop-up building with a glass freestanding structure, effectively a glorified glass box. So Not the most attractive building, but it is still there today, and is also at locations like Wood Street and various other stations around London. And we should be kind of glad in a sense that at least they actually built a station building here. Many other stations on the North London Railway just had a brick wall for an entrance, basically. This is Stamford Hill Station, which is looking not too bad in this image at the front here, but looks rather sad. And it was actually this photo that got Amir in touch with me when I was travelling to my during lockdown. I was assembling masks and stuff, and it was, I was desperate to get on trains. I really was, guys. So I had an excuse. I cycled to Stamford Hill, and I thought, what a sad sight. Wouldn't it be nice to get these old Great Eastern Railway, Eastern Counties buildings back in shape? And it also reminded me of what Stoke Newington would have looked like had it actually survived. And again, it would be nice to get, maybe get the stairs covered and stuff. So if you want to get a bit of an idea of what Stoke Newington would have looked like, go to Stamford Hill. These are the trains that have operated on the line since 1980s. In these wonderful colours, if you may remember, the Network South East, which again was another revolutionary idea across London, uniting London's transport network, a bit like London Overground has done today. And these trains survived privatisation and all these different colour schemes until we get through to the London Overground. And interestingly, if you notice up here, this lighter brickwork, there used to be stairs up here as well that were added in the early 20th century that were ripped out in the 60s. You could walk up these stairs onto Casanova Grove and exit the station that way. And these trains, they were in service here for about 40 odd years until finally being replaced by these. Now we have nice shiny Class 710 Alstom trains assembled up in Derby, which will hopefully do another good lot of service for maybe another 40 years on the lines through Stoke Newington. And thanks to TfL, we've got these new trains, and we've got the roundels, and we've got much better facilities than perhaps would have been the case had we not had the TfL taking over the West Anglia lines, as they're now known collectively. So I think I've whittled on for enough about trains. So I'll leave it there, and thank you very much for listening. Yeah, sure.